So now for our panel discussion, we have a great lineup of speakers that are covering the intriguing topic of the path for cell-based food to lead us to ensure an adequate global food supply to feed 10 billion people by 2050. So we have, again, an amazing lineup of speakers. We have Ahmed Khan, founder and editor at Cell Agri, Hugo Leo, faculty director at Penn State, Mario Shin, co-founder and CSO at Avant Meats, and Keith Barr, professor at UC Davis. Our moderator today is Dinesh Shah, serial entrepreneur, mentor, and strategist in food tech. So guys, thank you very much for being here. And Dinesh, please take it from here.
Thank you, Anna. Really excited to be here today, and this has been a fantastic ProteinX Symposium so far. So, about the topic today, just a couple of quick lines. Cell-based meat, cultured meat, clean meat, cellular meat, or even as some of us call it, lab-grown meat, right? Whatever you may call it, this exciting industry is touted to be one of the key solutions to sustainably feeding 10 billion people by 2050. And cell-based meat was, until very recently, like the human flight fantasy, which the Wright brothers brought to life. It was looked at as an impossible concept, something that people laughed at or criticized. And in just the last decade or so, innovations in scientific research, in entrepreneurship, in investments have taken cultured meat from very much a fringe Frankensteinish concept to a reality that is now delivered to people's doorsteps in Singapore. So timing couldn't be better to actually discuss the science behind cell-based meat, because according to the United Nations Environment Program, COVID-19, some of the biggest reasons behind it, the top two leading causes behind it are traditional animal agriculture and animal husbandry. So without further ado, let's jump into this with a fantastic panel that we have here today of scientists and entrepreneurs. I'd like to start with something that happened fairly recently, and a lot of people here in the audience and the panel, of course, you guys know about this. Just or Good Meats, came out with their products now available on Food Panda. People could just sit at home, make a couple of clicks on their phone, and boom, cell-based meat dishes, edible ones, approved by the government, regulatory, delivered to your places. This is kind of unbelievable. This is unreal in a way. And you guys are very much in the mix. We're all working on this together. I have a question here, for Leo. So on the one hand, yes, we see, a lot of promising developments in the consumer acceptance and clearer regulatory requirements to launch cell-based food offerings, right? Especially the ones that mimic the animal legacy. Now, there's still a high but declining production costs. How can scientific advancements, according to you, help accelerate some of these solutions that will lead to cell-based food production at scale to a competitive industry level? Over to you, Leo, and we can have some of the other panelists as well chime in, but we'd love to hear from you,
Leo. So, my lab work on the cell production, but originally it's focused on the therapeutic cell production. And now the protein industry come out, and we found that actually the technology developed for the biomedical applications can be slightly changed and applied to the meat industry. Now there are some shared point and also some difference. For the biomedical applications, therapeutic cell manufacture, we focus on the cell quality, and price and the scale maybe is not a big deal. For the meat industry is different. The focus is scale, how we can produce tons of meat per day, and at a price that can be accepted by the customer, which means comparable to the current meat. So, the cell culture meat is still new for academic or for universities. So we're trying to learning what the industry need, like how low the cost you guys want, and how big the scale you guys want. And then once we get this information, we can slightly, adjust our technology to meet that need. So we have a lot of scientific development in the biomedical field. We really want to hear the feedback from you guys so that we can improve or adjust our technology.
That's great. Thank you, Leo. I want to use that segue to sort of pose the same question to Mario. You're leading Avant Meats and raised funding in December 2020. You're setting up your new facility right now. Obviously, there's a lot of intersection you have with scientists and academia as well. How would you address some of the stuff that Leo just mentioned and just the overall question of producing cell-based meat at scale and some of the research on it?
Well, basically, in addition to the high cost of production being one of the pain points, scaling up is another pain point of the industry. So basically, we envision that for the first generation of product, it will be involving making a big batch of cells and then mixed with plant-based material to produce the final food product. If we are going that route, using a conventional, the good old bioreactor may be adequate to a certain extent. This type of bioreactor, they are very good at producing soluble protein, but not so much for the cell mass itself. So it can achieve the cell density to a certain extent. Beyond that, it will create a lot of shear stress to the cells, and actually you get a lower yield by pushing the cell density. So what we are thinking now, simply conventional batch processing or fed batch processing will not solve the problem. Even with hollow fiber bioreactor, that also face the same problem about how to scaling up, because you very seldomly see a hollow fiber bioreactor that's as tall as a grown man. So what we think that bioreactor using non-conventional operation mode, for example, ATF, TFF, that's allow us to bypass some of the nutrients or bypass some of the culture medium for waste removal or addition of medium, will allow us to really push the cell density. The other challenge that we are facing is that we definitely need a lot of capital to really build the production plants. Before achieving functional production plants, we are actually working with a CDMO company. And this company are usually producing drugs for the medical field. So we have to really work together with them, telling them what our specifications are and what our requirements are, in order to work with them to really make use or mobilize the hardware that they already have. So
that's really useful. Thank you, Mario. And I heard you talk about something, switching gears for a quick second from the science, but to something that's relating to the science, is the element of investments in this space, right? And Emma, I would like to pose a quick question to you, if you don't mind. You've been writing and studying the space of investments in all protein a fair amount. What, according to you, how is the cellular agriculture field's investment landscape changing to address these major scientific challenges in the field? Would love to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, thanks for the question. When people think about the cellular agriculture field, in particular the cell-cultured meat or the cell-based meat side, there's an impression that investments have always been flowing into this space, but that's far from the truth. It was only in this last year in 2020 when you're actually starting to see some sizable and large investments coming into the cell agriculture and cell-based meat space. If you look at, while cell agri, we focus on the cell agriculture side, we do track on what's happening on the wider alt protein space. And for one comparison, compared to areas that are now referred to as precision fermentation, what we call acellular agriculture, prior to 2020, less than 20% of all investments in the cell agriculture space had gone towards the cell-based meat side, and the majority of that had gone towards precision fermentation, or what we call acellular agriculture companies. And that really changed this last year in 2020. And the investment landscape has grown dramatically in the last, 18 months now to really support the growth of the cellular agriculture food sector. Despite the economic turmoil and the hardships from the coronavirus pandemic, the food landscape really pushed through to achieve quite a few milestones. As of last summer now, I believe July 2020, over $1 billion has now been invested in the cell agriculture food ecosystem. And as of last month, that number is now more than $1.5 billion invested into startups and companies now focusing directly on using cell cultures to produce part of our future food system. And the result of these investments, like you mentioned at the start, Janesh, cell agriculture is no longer just an idea. It can be done now. It can become part of our future food system. So moving forward, we're going to see a lot more of these large funding rounds from cell-based meat companies. You mentioned Eat Just and their spin-off, the Good Meat Company at the start. Last month, they announced a funding round of $170 million just to focus on scaling production now and highlighting some of these scientific challenges and production hurdles that the field will need to address now to scale and ultimately become at the same cost parity or even cheaper than conventional animal products. And having said that, while major companies like Eat Just and Memphis Meats, now Upside Foods, are trying to address many of these technical pain points all in-house behind scaling production, ideas from cell line production to cell culture media formulation, all the way to other technologies like bioreactor technologies. At the same time, we are starting now to see in the investment landscape notable investments in companies looking to focus on specific technical pain points. And if these new companies succeed, what you'll get is an entire whole supply chain and ecosystem focusing around cell cultured meat and addressing some of these scientific challenges behind the field. Just to give a few examples of what I mean by that, in August 2020, a company based in Iceland called Orf Genetic received a 2.5 million euro grant from the European Commission to focus on their barley crop platform to produce growth factors for cell cultured meat production. Growth factors are a key cost point and scientific hurdle at the moment to help the field reach cost parity. So it'll be really interesting to see how that platform works now to support the growth of cell cultured meat and ultimately reduce the cost. On a side note, using barley crop to produce cell cultured meat formulation ingredients, could that be a way for us to transition farmers already growing animal feed for livestock to also then becoming farmers to grow feed for the cell culture media in the future? An interesting implication over there. But along with that, last month, a company called Orbillion Bio raised $5 million in their own seed funding round just to focus on cell line development, not necessarily the whole end product, but just focusing on helping companies produce cell lines that can scale well for this field and address that scientific hurdle and pain point. Moving forward, we'd like to see a lot more funding rounds for companies just like this to help scale the field entirely moving forward. So it'll be really exciting space.
That's fantastic. That was a lot of good information there, Emma. Thank you for walking us through. The barley example is fantastic, and that aspect around cell growth media or culture, brings me back to the question. We talked about scale a little bit earlier, but I think when we refer to cost, that's another aspect that's something that's really, really mind-boggling. Obviously, it's come down a huge fraction over just the last 5 to 10 years. But I'd like to throw this question to Mario first, and maybe the other panelists after, in terms of growth media, any other aspects. How do you see cost going down, and perhaps even where do you see the industry heading over the next 5 to 10 years? Very popular question. When will it be at par with animal meat costs, according to you?
Okay, so previously the developments of animal component-free medium geared towards the biologics production, basically focusing on two very major cell types, 2 and 3, and also the CHO cells for making antibodies, for example. So now we, after the boom of the cell-based meat industry, now we have a much larger demand for alternative culture medium that can be used to culture, for example, non-typical species, for example, cow or chicken or even fish. So there are lots of opportunities there, are lots of room for further improvement of the culture medium. For example, for food production, we don't really use pharmaceutical GMP standard. We can simply use food grade GMP standard as in sourcing the raw material, in mixing the culture medium and things like that. So that will drastically reduce some of the raw material the cost of the raw material. And the other, but most of the cost of the culture medium comes from the protein components. A lot of options can be choose from plant-based material to recombinant protein. And in terms of the recombinant protein, most of the growth factors that we are using now, the protein factor that we are using now, are basically human sequence, or they are geared towards culturing mammalian species, specifically human or mouse. So there are plenty of room for improvement in that sense. We could tailor-make specific growth factors or protein factors that are more suitable for non-typical species to grow. In addition to that, for the growth factors that the traditional formulations in the culture medium, a lot of the material, especially the growth factors, put in excess, so to ensure the cells are grow in the tip-top conditions. A lot of the after the each batch of culture, basically the limiting factor is not the growth factors. It's more more related to the waste or some other more simple ingredients. So if we can spend more R&D effort on tailor-made culture medium that are customized for specific cell type, specifically reducing the more expensive part and putting in the limiting part, that will allow us to greatly reduce the cost of production in general.
Fantastic. Leo, would you like to chime in on any pieces you're making?
Can I actually step in, Janesh?
Oh, please.
Yeah. So this is actually one of the things that we're doing at a very high level at UC Davis. So as one of the keynotes, David Block would have been speaking previously in the ProteinX Symposium. Basically, as Mario said, a lot of the cultured medias are designed for CHO cells or 293 cells. And it was David's kind of modeling-based system that was the basis for developing of the medias that those cells are grown in. So we've adapted those artificial intelligence-based models to actually begin to address the issue of cultured meat media. And as we heard previously, big costs are coming in from growth factors and from the things that are consumed. And so not enough science has been put into the place to understand what things are being consumed by the cells, what waste products are being released, and then how can we go in, and as Mario said, the protein components, we can come in with much cheaper and much more accessible protein components if we have a way that we can test thousands upon thousands of different permutations as quickly as possible. And that's where these artificial intelligence-based models are coming in to really quickly develop new growth factor free medias, and also to employ growth factors that are coming from, as Ahmad said, coming from barley, or there's other growth factors that you can produce from mushroom-based or fungal-based systems. So incorporating those growth factors from alternative sources that are not recombinant, that aren't those high cost growth factors, and then incorporate that in with alternative forms of proteins, whether it's yeast-based, peptide-based, all of these other forms of getting protein into the media. Now what we've got these possibilities to dramatically decrease the cost of media associated with cultured meat. And we just published maybe 2 months ago a nice review on how we're going to be able to engineer these cultured medias that are going to be able to drive the cultured meat market forward.
That was very useful, and I love the mention of technology and computational power there, because that's an important component of why this industry can sort of keep moving forward at pace. Leo, Emma, anything to add to this particular aspect around cost reduction in the space, or growth media, or any of these aspects?
Yeah, sure. So Mario and Dr. Boyd just mentioned how to reduce the cost through studying the biology of the cells and the media formulation. At the Penn State, we try to tackle these questions through another aspect, is how to design new bioreactor and a new bioprocess. By the way, we just set up a new cell manufacture facility, which is donated by Sartori's. So what we're thinking is if we want to achieve the scale and the cost, we have to rethink the bioprocess or manufacture process. Now, the current way, just like Mario mentioned, people try to grow a lot of cells using the existing bioreactor, like a still tank bioreactor. And then you feed this cell to a scaffold using the traditional tissue engineering. Is this approach durable for cell culture meat industry? We need to think about that. So at Penn State, we have a few people, including myself. We think we need to develop a totally new bioprocess to manufacture meat. And in order to achieve that, we need like a new bioreactor. Give you an example. Can we like integrate, make the bioprocess much shorter and quicker, and integrate the cell expansion and the tissue fabrication using a one batch process, right? Can we do that? So another example is like we recently developed a very interesting bioreactor we call is RG-tube microbioreactors. So basically we grow the cells and further mature them into micro tissues in this micro scale arginate hydrogel tubes. So by the way, the microbioreactor are edible, right? You don't need to get rid of them after fabrication. So you make a lot of these micro tissues. Now that is the building block for your meat fabrication. And the density, we can go up to the tissue level. That means 100 to 300 million cells per mil of the culture volume. So much, much higher than the still tank, very close to, I think it's so Mario mentioned the hollow fab system. This is very similar to the hollow fab concept, but this one is dissolvable and edible, and make your scale up actually much easy. And another thing, this technology can be linearly scaled. Means like the still tank, if you cut your cell, if it work well in a 100 liter still tank bioreactor, it doesn't mean it work well in a 1,000 liter bioreactor. But for the microbioreactor, you just simply increase the amount of the tubes. So anyway, what I try to say is, now in addition to the media formulation and the cell line development, we need to rethink about the bioprocess and the bioreactors. I think we need to develop a totally new system instead of try to optimize the existing bioreactor. Yes.
Those are some great points. That's fascinating. Thank you, Leo. And Emma, would you like to add some of your thoughts to this, please?
Yeah, sure. Just want to add in just one last idea before I guess the next question is, with all these great scientists on board this panel as well, one of the main areas for collaboration for helping address some of these technical hurdles and cost reduction is through supporting scientists and public funding of universities and university research to help get this field forward. Historically, cell agriculture and cell-cultured meat has typically fallen in the gap. Its application of the cutting-edge biomedical sciences in food science almost. So there's a lot of, it falls between the gap of many funding areas. So while we've currently usually rely on funding channels like through nonprofits, it'd be hopeful to get more funding from the public sector to help grow this field. UC Davis actually became the first US university to receive US government funding to support cultured meat research. So I think that's going to be a major way moving forward to help address some of these challenges for the field.
Fantastic. And that brings me to a good natural segue. Keith, love to hear some of your thoughts on what that journey has been like since that grant at UC Davis and just the overall development of this space through UC Davis, one of the leading entities in the space.
Yeah, so again, one of the big things that this space is really has an issue with is that if you go off and you search online for this old TV show called Better Off Ted, the second episode of Better Off Ted is these crazy engineers are going to engineer meat in a dish, and they have this great scene where they've got this big old chunk of steak and it's moving and they electrically stimulate it and it's going. I think that's what most general people think of when they think of muscle. And when we started engineering muscle like in a dish maybe 15 years ago, we were going for force production and we were going for all of these things that were related to the functionality of a muscle. And so when people started to transition from that idea of muscle to the idea of meat, it's a big step to then say, we're not going to have that big thing in the dish that you see on Better Off Ted. What we're going to do is we're going to do the things that Leo and what Mario are talking about, which is you have these big vats full of cells, and the cells are now muscle cells, or they're some kind of meat-based cell that you can then put into a secondary process to make this tissue. And so when we started doing that at UC Davis, it started as David Block and myself coming together. We had a couple of students who were really interested in this space, and he had this great experience with developing medias to expand into to be able to grow at scale. And we had this experience of being muscle biologists and understanding what the muscle was supposed to do and how it was supposed to work. And it really was letting him and the process take over. As Leo was saying, the process is much more important here, because if we're trying to build a muscle the way that we build a muscle in an animal, where you make these huge cells that are able to produce force, there's no way that we're going to do that in a dish because of all of the limitations that are put on that. But what we've done at UC Davis is we've let other people come in. And then the greatest thing about UC Davis is we had the first person ever to clone a cow was here at UC Davis, where, Pablo Garcia Ross, who could then generate these embryonic stem cells from cows and from chickens and from sheep and all of these different organisms. So we have the cell development side as far as the agriculture and the reproductive science in the ag school. So that was a really important part. Then you've got the people and David's in enology. So he's the chair of enology. So he's mostly was focused on wine, and then he was doing cultures for recombinant protein development. And so what it is and what this field is bringing together people who have absolutely nothing to do with muscle and traditional meat, and it's coming up with completely classical different ways of thinking and different ways of processing and doing all of that. So Kent Leach, who's doing the components of building the structure, he's traditionally a bone person who looks at angiogenesis in bone, but now what he's doing is he's applying what he knows from that area as an incredible expertise there, and he's bringing that into something where he can produce a product that's going to actually give us something that is, for every purpose, steak-like. And so then you combine that with the expertise that we have in the ag school as far as taste and as far as technoeconomics and as far as all of these different things. And now what we have is we have a program that's really exceptional. And, and again, it's one of those things where I know that they've had people from Cornell on here, and I know that Leo would argue that Penn State, but Davis is #1 in the world for ag school, for vet school, and food science. And when you have that kind of structure, now what you've got is you've got a bunch of people who are around who do something that are related, but nothing really to do with meat. And now you can bring those people in and you can create an environment that is completely changing how we think about generating that piece of meat that you're going to be eating.
That's awesome, Keith. I have to unfailingly use a sport analogy here. You're hitting it out of the park for UC Davis there, and obviously you work with a lot of sports teams. So that's fantastic. That's a great overview of how that program's gone about and how you're looking at it. One of the key things that this now brings me to is what you said is people from seemingly different backgrounds coming together to create cell-based meat or cultured meat and everything around it, right? I want to pose this question to everyone on the panel, hopefully starting with Leo. Considering the challenge of producing cultured meat is to replicate the muscle growing environment found in a cow or other animals, like he just mentioned, and recapitulate it in the lab or the factory. What findings in the development of the systems that are designed to cultivate induced pluripotent stem cells, what in this area could be applied to the research and development of cell-based food, according to you? And the larger question overall that comes to head is, what other areas of scientific innovation can lend something or, contribute something to this space? Let's start with Leo, and would love to hear your thoughts from all the panelists on this.
Okay, so I mean, my lab during the past years mainly focus on how to expand and differentiate the human pluripotent stem cells. So maybe I can share some experience we have in the lab. So number one is now people think about isolating the muscle like a satellite cell from different animals and expand them. I think maybe another way to do that is starting with the pluripotent stem cell. Like especially some species like the rodent, that differentiation from the rodent pluripotent stem cell into the muscle cell, actually it's a very quick process, only take about 1 week to 10 days, but Dr. Ban know much better than me on this topic. So that can be a thing. So the good thing about pluripotent stem cells, the growth rate is much faster than the satellite cell. Doubling time for the rodent pluripotent stem cell is about 24 hours to 28 hours, which is much shorter than the adult stem cells. And they are naturally immortalized, right? You can cut them forever. And for differentiation, some of the pluripotent stem cells, actually the media can be completely defined. You don't need any serum. So that is about the cell line. The second thing we learned from this pluripotent stem cell study is, which lead to my previous opinion is, maybe we really need to think about the new culture system. We just had a lot of problems trying to manufacture the cells at a large scale using the current technology. That's why I think we need to rethink about the manufacture process and the bioreactor. We need to develop a new ones, next generation. Yes, that's my.
Thank you, Leo. That's really helpful. Keith, Emma, am I saying, or Mario, anything to add there?
Yeah, actually, yes. Since we are based in Hong Kong, we focus a lot on the China market and to a certain extent the EU market. The thing is that they are very strict about genetic modification in the food aspect. So we, instead of iPSC, we are focusing more on satellite cells. Satellite cells in mammalian species is relatively well defined as compared to those in the fish species. So we have we did some search and try to find out the good marker, basically a good marker to really select the cells, to enrich the cells, satellite cells. We have some success in that aspect. We were able to really use some previous published marker that are not known to really known to be useful for selecting satellite cells. So we have some success in that. And in addition to that, we are also focusing on the optimizing the culture medium to culture the fish satellite cells. And more particularly, we are also focusing on food grade scaffold, basically to provide solid matrix for a cell to grow. And ideally, we are emphasize more on how the cells are performing on the scaffold, how they are secreting the ECM, because in the second generation or the next generation product, we cannot simply mix the cells with a scaffold as a final food product. We are more we will be more focusing on making a tissue-like structure that the cells secrete its own ECM, maintain the structure, and then we can probably digest away some of the plant-based material, so to increase the cell-based component in the final food product. So yeah, so we are focusing on multiple aspects dealing with the satellite cells in fish.
That's great to see a different approach to this, especially with the the regional environments taken into consideration. Emma, Keith, anything to add to this particular line of thinking at all?
So I'm happy to add a little bit into it. And one of the things that Mario is discussing is this idea of the matrix, and it's a really important idea because a lot of the structure of what you're going to be biting into is going to come from that matrix. And there's, as he said, there's different ways of doing it. The way that Leo's doing it is using basically a sugar-based tube. The way that Mario is doing it is putting down some plant-based matrix, and there's other ways that you can do it as well. You can use, as Mario is doing, you can use other things like fungus. You could use other, which is going to be a protein source as well that's been widely used, at least in our country. There's alternative proteins that are fungal based, and or there's another option, and that's one that we're exploring here, which is to produce the basic matrix proteins that you would find in an animal that are not normally found in a plant, and to produce those using plant cells that you can grow at huge scale, that you might be able to grow together with the muscle-based cells. And now what you've got is these digestible plant cells, but that are also producing collagen, and those cells can actually produce a matrix which those muscle cells can then interact with and have some of the matrix interactions that Mario is talking about. So there's multiple different ways to attack these problems, and that's where the more people that we have attacking these problems and looking at them with their unique ways of thinking, the better and the faster this whole area is going to develop. And that's why it's kind of sad that there's only, like as Ahmad said, ours is the first major government-based grant in the United States for lab-based food. When we're talking about other things that are not nearly as impactful, having thousands of grants across the country, the more brains that we have, the quality of the people here, the better and the faster we're going to make advances.
Great point, Keith. Thank you, Emma.
Yeah, just to add on to what everyone's been saying, if the goal of the cellular agriculture field is to help develop a novel way of producing food all around the world, we're going to need these scientific experts, these engineering experts in terms of scaling it, as well as communication experts from all around the world coming together and getting involved in this field. It can't just be a handful of companies in one part of the world in particular. It has become a global movement. Best example of this is with Mario and Avant Meats. One of their first product showcases was a cell-based fish maw, a local delicacy from the region. Having people from all around the world working on this field helps you design food products that appeal to people from all over, not just a few individual products. So I think that's something I can really add to.
Fantastic. That's really useful. I'm going to switch gears here. One quick thing to talk about here that I think doesn't get addressed enough in a lot of these conversations. And Keith, I would hope that, given your deep involvement with lots of sports teams that all the way up to the national, international level, you can add a little bit of muscle to this issue or this tissue. The question for you is this, right? I mean, what do you think are the scientific advancements that can help accelerate improved solutions for cell-based food, more so in relation to how they address health in nutrition at an industry level? When you work with these athletes, when you focus on musculoskeletal cell development and recovery and exercise affecting all of this in nutrition, and how does the work in cell-based meat complement other programs such as alternative protein programs? Would love to hear some of your thoughts on this.
Yeah, so that's a big area, and I'm happy to provide some of it. The nice thing about when you're starting to engineer something like meat is that you can actually make manipulations of the product based on what's in the media. So we've seen it with like different egg products where the egg will have higher omega-3 fatty acids because they're feeding the chicken something. You can simply do those types of things to modify the types of fatty acids that are produced, the types of other proteins that are going to be produced within those cells, by modifying the media, and that's going to give you a different product. It's going to give you different fatty acid profile, for example, that maybe has a more beneficial effect. And so that's one of the distinct possibilities. And we have a gentleman here who's at UC Davis whose specialty is understanding the fatty acids and understanding how those fatty acids contribute to both taste but also to nutrition. So those types of things where you can manipulate, because you have total control over the system, you can manipulate the small things to make it more digestible for people, or you can make it that it has a better fatty acid profile, or you can change the amino acid profile slightly. And so that's important, because one of the things that we know that's been problematic in shifting people into plant-based proteins is that plant-based proteins are more difficult for our body to digest and absorb, because the plants, most of their protein is associated with the seed. And if you were able to digest and absorb all of the protein from the seed, those plants wouldn't survive into the next generation, because what they've had to do is they've had to protect it from from animals eating it. And so what they do is they make it harder to digest and absorb. And so what a lot of energy is going into is trying to figure out whether you can make those plant-based proteins more digestible and absorbable, or can you use those proteins as starting materials in something like a cultured meat. So when you're talking about lab-based meat or cultured meat, and you're talking about alternative protein sources, those things are going to develop hand in hand, because they're going to really feed off of each other. And the better we can get it at cultured meat, the more of a challenge it's going to be for those people who are trying to do alternative meats in basically plant-based industry. And what's going to happen is they're going to up their game as we up our game. And so it's going to be this really interesting thing where, as anything in competition, we know that as one side gets better, the other side's going to put a lot more time and effort and resources into improving their structure as well. And then as far as being able to optimize for performance and optimize for nutrition, a lot of what we're looking at there is that when we're going to take an athlete, we want to have certain components that are in the food that are going to provide that athlete with what he needs or she needs in order to recover, to get better, to perform better. And that's true at an athlete at any level, from the highest level down to myself or other people who are as hopeless at athletics as myself. So when we are able to manipulate the fatty acid profile, the amino acid profile, for example, being able to add a little bit of collagen-based protein into it is going to provide my body with different things that I might need to grow and recover to a better degree. And because we have total control over that to some degree in these lab-based systems, we can actually engineer a product that's potentially better nutritionally for the people that we're trying to target it to.
That's fantastic. Really, really good information there, and that's an important part of what we need to consider. This folks are going to eat it at the end of the day, and especially like the likes of top level athletes. Leo, Mario, how do you guys think about this? You guys think deeply about the science side of it, or producing it, scaling it, the cost, the technology, and at the levels of cells. But when you take a little step back in terms of nutrition as well, how do you guys think about it? What are some of the challenges you look at, in this space?
Mario, you can go first.
Okay, yeah. So again, I mean, for the first generation of cultivated meat products, very likely there will be a portion of them being a plant-based material. So a lot of people are asking whether the cultivated meat product will have the biochem or nutritional value resemble to the original food product. So in this case, for the first generation of product, it will be not very resemble to the original product. So in that case, the challenge is how to really minimize the plant-based material in the final food product. And at the same time, a lot of other companies are growing fat cells, cultivating fat cells to produce. Actually, the aim for cultivating the fat cells is not really to produce the fatty acid components, because basically the plant-based fatty acid biochemically is basically the same as the animal-based fatty acid. It's more for the not for the nutritional value, it's more for the flavors in that sense. So we still have quite a few challenges in achieving first generation product that can resemble or as good as the original product. But the other thing is that we can, there is also opportunity for us to really take away some of the less healthy components in the original food product, for example, saturated fatty acid. So in that case, a lot of nowadays the food products are supplements with algae oil, for example, to supplement the food product with a much more healthy component.
Over to you, Leo. Thank you, Mario.
Yeah, just like Dr. Bond and Mario said, I mean, if you can engineer food, then you can totally control what you want put into the food. Not just the nutrients, right? Also the taste and the structure. And so means you can make a diverse of food that you can get rid of the stuff that's not healthy to the people and add something that may be benefit for a certain population with certain conditions. So that's really something fantastic if you can make the meat in life. It give you the power to control.
Fantastic. I thank you, Leo. I wanted to take a second also. I think Emma mentioned something about this having to be a global thing. Mario touted about this as well. It's interesting. This panel itself, right now, we have folks all the way from Hong Kong, Dubai. I'm in Mumbai. We have California and Pennsylvania here. So this is a pretty good representation, and a lot of people in the audience from all around the world. So it's good to see that sort of global interest in the space overall. This brings me to a point that we've kind of brought into game earlier. We need global entities, global companies, universities, investors, all sorts of folks in this space coming together, working on this together. So the two key aspects I would hope, for the panel to address in the next question is, one, what are thoughts you want to share around synergy between governments, academia, and industry here in terms of how they work together? What are some of the challenges in this space? Maybe even, from the perspective of intellectual property and research. And the other question, and I would hope to start with you, Ahmad, the second question here would be also, how do you see the role of the leading large food companies, the incumbents in this space, sort of participating in this, biting a piece of this meat, so to say?
Yeah, great question. I think 100% there's a lot of different opportunities for traditional food and agricultural companies to get involved in the cell agriculture food ecosystem. I can't comment on the academia side, but in terms of traditional food companies, supply chain development is going to be really critical for the field's success, and partnerships with these established players in the food, the meat, and agricultural space, and even pharmaceutical industries can help to support the field's growth while finding their own footing in this brand new ecosystem as well. To advance the field to the next level, we've already spoken about all these different areas that need to be addressed. And some of these white spaces are starting to be addressed by companies themselves, and there are also white space opportunities for traditional food companies to get involved with the ecosystem as well. So that's something that's going to be really interesting. I'm sure Mario has shared a lot of insights in terms of what Avant Meats is already doing, announcing recently in the last few months, new partnerships with both companies on the biotech side as well as in the traditional food space to help take Avant Meats and accelerate their speed. But like we've already seen the last year and likely to come in the years progress, we will see more conventional agriculture, meat, and pharmaceutical players explore how they can apply their expertise into the cell agriculture supply chain. And not only will this help new companies coming up in the cell agriculture space, it'll make sure that these corporations could continue to play a role in the future food supply chain, or even present an opportunity for biotech and some pharmaceutical players to even enter the food supply chain. If pharmaceutical and life science players do become a part of our future food supply chain because of their role in the technology side of cell agriculture, could that be sort of the idea of food becomes medicine? Who knows? But there are definitely a lot of hurdles to still overcome for the field, and from the cell agri perspective, partnerships with traditional food players will be a big part in addressing them.
Fantastic. Thank you, Emma. I would naturally transition next word to Mario. You mentioned, Emma, something about Avant Meats and their partnerships in this space. And Mario, would you love to add some thoughts here? I'd love to open it up to Keith and Leo after as well.
All right. Yeah, I will make it short. So yeah, basically the advantage of partnering with food companies is that they are very proficient in the regulatory affairs of food. So with them, we understand the downstream processing and also the supply chain and also all the regulation requirements that the local government or other government are looking at. So that helps us a lot in navigating this aspect of the food industry.
That's great. Keith, Leo, would you like to add anything to this? Leo, looks like there's something to add.
Okay, so about the industry and the university collaboration. So for a lot of the university, like Penn State, we have a lot of resource. So originally built for the biomedical research, but they definitely can be used for the food industry. So I like to tell the industry, I mean, just reach out and you will find that the university can provide a lot of help. For me, I think build a piece of meat is not technically is not difficult based on the biomedical technology. What we need to do now is to reduce the cost and increase the skill. That's why we need the industry to like collaborate, right? We need to know what you want. So that is about the industry and the university collaboration. Now, university research needs funding. The funding comes from the federal government or industry. Now, if industry don't have a lot of funding for the university, at least you guys can do is push the government, federal government, to increase the funding for this field. Let them know that it's a huge emerging industry coming out, will benefit the like a world population. That way we can get some funding from the federal government. Yeah, that's my thought on this collaboration.
And Keith, would love to hear some of your thoughts on what could be some of the potentially synergistic like partnerships in this space as well, and what some of the other panelists just said.
Absolutely, and I think the most important thing that we can do as universities is we can educate the next generation of scientists who are going to go out into industry. So we've seen that at Davis, and people have talked about how, oh, this person at what was formerly Memphis Meats, oh yeah, they were a Davis grad who went. A lot of the people who are in this space are coming from here. We've got a summer cultured meat, some like week-long class now that we're holding, and we're actually starting to develop a degree program that's going to be around this kind of area of extending our food science into cultured meats, so that a lot more people coming through are going to be skilled individuals who can go and move directly into these companies and really facilitate that next step that the company is going to make. But in order for us to do that, as Leo was saying, the company then needs to go to their representatives and say, you know what, it really helps us when we develop these lines of kind of progression so that we get the skilled people who are going to come into us. The only way that's going to happen is if we fund this area of research so that they can do the research and develop the next generation of great scientists that we're going to bring into industry.
Thank you, Keith. That is really, really useful. We're sort of trying to almost coming up on time. I want to use this time quickly to take one of the questions I think there has been from the audience, which is, I believe, referring to, how do you measure, the ability to digest and the body to assimilate not naturally produced meat? I mean, how it's been stated, but we know how we use different terms for these. But would love to hear a quick round of thoughts. And I'll save one quick question at the end for Anna, if that's okay. Let's just spend a quick 30 seconds, go around the room, starting with Keith, please.
So we do this right now with proteins from other sources. We feed them to people, we take blood. We're doing it right now in a variety of different studies that are around alternative proteins. So all we do is we do a clinical study, we feed people different things, we draw their blood, we look at amino acid content, we look at other things within the blood, and then we use secondary things to actually measure the effectiveness of those nutrients on the ability to grow muscle and other things.
Awesome. That's a good packed answer. Leo, Mario, anything to comment on this front? You may have tackled these kind of questions, I'm assuming, as well.
Again, I mean, for engineering the system means we can control everything.
Perfect. That's a great succinct answer. Mario.
Oh yeah, I think that's a very interesting question, and we definitely, as a cell-based meat company, we definitely need to partner with the academia to really look into it from a more detailed point of view.
Awesome. And moderating that to it, I have one last question after this.
Nothing else to add beyond what's been stated. I think those are really great answers about the science behind how we measure everything, how we measure the products.
One only final question I'd like to ask, not related to the science of the field, is what keeps you interested in waking up every day excited working on what you're working on. This is really challenging. It's a long-term effort, global effort, lots of challenges along the way. People have perception problems, all sorts of issues. What keeps you going? I'll just start with my quick answer. It's basically we either do this or we go to planet B, which I like the idea of going to planet B, but we still need planet A to eat and survive 10 billion people by 2050. And I couldn't be working on something more exciting and more impactful than this. But over to you. Let's start with Keith. Let's go around the room, please.
Yeah. So again, what I'm trying to do is help people get the nutrients they need to perform their best.
Perfect. Love it. Mario next.
Yeah. We aim to provide a more sustainable source of meat. And to add to that, even moving to planet B, we still need a new way to produce meat.
Fantastic. Leo, you're up next. What keeps you excited?
I think I do this is because it's a lot of fun. This is for the young generation. It's a lot of fun if you come play with this game.
Fantastic. It is definitely pretty exciting and fun. And last but not least, Emma, would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really exciting. We're helping playing our own role in trying to transform our food system to be more sustainable, and I think that has many global implications everywhere.
Fantastic. Thank you all on the panel today and everyone in the audience for a fantastic panel discussion. Hopefully we were able to make you guys take away some important pieces of information from all these experts on the panel today. Over to you, Anna. Thank you.